For 22 years, the dominant narrative about the 2004 Super Bowl has been wrong. The wardrobe malfunction wasn't even half the story. The full story includes this lunatic, maniacal maniac who demanded obedience and groveling in a woman who refused to give it to him. And it looks like history might be showing us who was on the right side.
This is the woman at the center of it all, Janet Jackson.
But then that busted bustier that had everybody talking about the game.
Actually, I was looking right at it, and I didn't see it.
It was one of the most controversial moments in Super Bowl history, and it had nothing to do with football.
Now come reports that CBS may ban both from the Grammy broadcast.
Timberlake also blamed what he called a wardrobe malfunction. But the head of the Federal Communications Commission calls it a deplorable stunt, ordering a full-scale investigation.
CBS, the NFL had no knowledge of this whatsoever, and unfortunately, the whole thing went wrong in the end.
Well, she's now said that they had a plan.
I don't know if you planned something like that on the Super Bowl. I still don't know if I quite buy that.
Janet, that was disgusting. You're fired.
I'm really sorry.
Please do not send any hate or honestly comments of any kind to anyone mentioned in this video on behalf of me or yourself. The purpose of this video is to give my commentary and opinion on matters of public concern. Thank you. In 2004, we all watched live as one woman's career basically was destroyed before our very eyes. And this man right here, he was watching along with us. As it turns out, he orchestrated what would turn into the takedown of Janet Jackson. Now, that's just according to reports and information that I am going to provide in this video, but you're welcome to make your own mind up on this issue. According to reports, this man was cruel, egotistical, and maniacal, and years later, he would face accusations himself of being a serial predator, but we will get into that in due time. From what I can tell, nobody has really connected the dots in this way, and y'all know I like to do the little webbing. The web is getting kind of big over here, but I want to offer a different angle, an alternative perspective to this whole Janet Jackson Super Bowl Justin Timberlake situation. So make sure you hit the like, and we'll get into that right now. So pretty much everybody knows about this incident in one way or another, and some people even think that they have the full story. Many YouTube airwaves, thumbnails, titles have been dedicated to this issue, to this incident, the Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction. 2004 Super Bowl, the so-called supposed wardrobe malfunction. I'm saying that in quotes because I think it was pretty clear that it was a function. It wasn't mal. Mal means that it went wrong. I think it went exactly how they planned it. But this issue, this incident was, from what I can tell, aided and abetted by Justin Timberlake right there for the world to see. But here's the part I think needs a little bit more attention. The whole story didn't really play out there on the stage. Really, to get the full story, you have to sort of zoom out for over 10 years. Since, after the incident happened. And we really cannot tell the whole story or even get to a bigger part of this story without looking at what happened behind closed doors at the CBS headquarters in the days and the weeks and the months and even years following the incident. It would be impossible to tell that story without mentioning one kind of mysterious man who wielded more power over American media than possibly anyone else ever has and ever will, Les Moonves. We have to also talk about how Les, in my opinion, and in many people's opinion, used that extreme power to systematically dismantle the career of one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived. So the first question out the gate is why? What would be in it for him? What would be his motivation? Well, believe it or not, the motivation behind it, as far as I could tell, had nothing to do with the wardrobe malfunction. It was more about the fact that Janet Jackson herself refused to grovel and beg, bend the knee, kiss the ring. She refused. As a result, she was punished. So who is this egotistical maniac? Well, we did mention him in the most recent video I made about the America's Next Top Model machine, Les Moonves. Or Leslie is his real name, but he goes by Les. And hopefully by the time we're finished with today's video, you're going to understand that what he did to Janet Jackson wasn't just cruel and tyrannical. It may have been legally actionable. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty, but I have some theories. Turns out Janet Jackson's punishment might have even been all the way up to unconstitutional. But the man who destroyed her career, or at least attempted to, he ended up getting what he had coming to some extent. He lost his job. He's disgraced. He didn't get his severance package. And it was because he was just acting exactly the same way that he had always acted toward Janet Jackson and other people who stood in his way or pissed him off. So let's get in the time machine. We got to set the stage. We're going back to February 1st, 2004. So the teams playing the New England Patriots, the Carolina Panthers, they're at Reliant Stadium in Houston, Texas. Over 140 million people were tuning in live for the halftime show and the Super Bowl, but the halftime show happened in the middle of it on CBS. Now, this blast from the past, today we know that Rock Nation, Live Nation, Jay-Z, he has his hands all in the mix of the Super Bowl halftime show. But back in the day, 2004, it was actually MTV who produced the halftime show. I mean, this was the golden era of halftime shows, like it or hate it. And also there was this choose or lose propaganda, like voter registration campaign. And when I say propaganda, I don't even necessarily mean it's like, a bad thing. I do think people should vote. People died for our right to vote and all that. But there was always something going on with the vote or die and the choose or lose, but don't confuse choose or lose with vote or die. Although I would understand if you did, because look at the characters who were involved in it. Even vote or die was like Diddy's thing.
Be different. Choose to be independent.
Choose to care.
Choose to take a stand.
Choose to vote.
Choose to vote.
Choose to vote.
Choose to vote.
The halftime show we're going to be talking about today, the Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake, pasty gate. It included Sean P. Diddy Puff Daddy Combs. We'll talk about him more in a minute. Other legends such as Kid Rock and Nelly. Nobody ever better tell me Nelly did anything wrong because, wow, just let us keep hope out for Nelly, okay? But the headliner of the show was Janet Jackson, and she at this point was completely solidified icon status. This was not an up-and-comer. Now, Janet Jackson, for her halftime headline performance, she would feature Justin Timberlake as a sidekick character. And if you will recall, Justin Timberlake started out way early on in the Mickey Mouse Club. Then he was recruited or groomed, or whatever you want to call it, to be in NSYNC. This is a boy band we talked a little bit about before on this channel. We actually have a whole video about NSYNC. Justin Timberlake then broke off from NSYNC and he became a solo artist. And this is right in the couple years that was going on. So like I mentioned, at this point, 2004, Janet Jackson was already like certified icon within the music industry. She had 10 #1 hits by that time. Every single one of her albums was considered a classic. She held many records, including the record for the most consecutive top 10 entries on the Billboard Hot 100 by a female artist, 18 in a row. She had Grammy nominations across 5 genres. She was nominated for Grammys in 5 musical genres: pop, rock, dance, rap, and R&B. Billboard had named her the second most successful artist, not female artist, not rap artist, not R&B artist, no, period. The second most successful artist in the entire decade of the 1980s, and she held the largest recording contract in music history twice. Okay, so this is one of the most accomplished and respected entertainers of the 20th century. Remember that. So at the end of the halftime performance, during the final lyric, and I do want to just point out right here, the final lyric was, "Gonna have you naked." By the end of this song, Justin Grubby Grabbers Timberlake reaches over and rips away a piece of Janet Jackson's costume. For 9/16 of 1 second, this is an actual measurement cited in federal court filings, 9/16 of a second, her right, we'll say chest, covered by a little shield. A lot of people think there was some type of piercing or some type of like decoration or something around it. Well, I did do a little bit of research with the recently uploaded HD version of this video. I mean, I didn't really want to have to do that, but I did want to be informed when I made this video, and it's completely actually covered. It's like, I don't know if it's a sticker, I don't know if she glued it on or what, but like, if you really do investigate, really nothing actually was showing. I'm trying to be, careful with the words I use here, but 9/16 of a second is how long her chest was exposed, we'll say. And then the camera cuts away, the pyrotechnics fire, the show ends, and all hell breaks loose. Everybody was talking about this from like at the Super Bowl. I mean, it's kind of almost like, where were you? Where were you February 1st, 2004 when all hell broke loose? I mean, the next day or whatever, we were talking about it at school. Janet Jackson was naked on TV. People went crazy. There was news clips. The Christians were mad. The Muslims were mad. The Mormons were mad. Everybody was mad. All hell breaks loose. And even out the gate, late, it started to kind of just be like Janet Jackson was the one everybody was mad at, even though Justin Timberlake was the one that did the ripping. Now, just to be very clear, I actually truly do believe everyone knew about this stunt. Janet knew, Justin knew, I think Les Moonves probably, and I think everybody knew. I think everybody knew that it was going to happen, but there was a lot of discourse in the days, weeks, and months that followed this event. But have y'all actually seen that full halftime show? Go back and give that thing a gander. First of all, we had Nelly and Diddy and Kid Rock, like I said. Then there's 2 songs about getting naked in the halftime show. And the halftime show was like 10, 15, I think it's like 11 minutes long. There's 2 songs about getting naked, and there's a Diddy chant, and then Have You Naked by the end of this song. He rips the thing off. So first of all, like I said, I love Nelly. I really hope that he never did anything untoward, but I know y'all remember his instant classic. It's getting hot in here. Let's take off all your clothes. What is it? It's getting hot in here. So take off all your clothes. I am getting so hot. I want to take my clothes off. So he did that. He performed that song. And there were these cheerleaders, and they're stripping. They had on a black cheerleader outfit. They stripped off the top. Now they had a white cheerleader outfit. I mean, they're getting naked by the end of the song too.
I am getting so hot, I want to take my clothes off.
Why is Sean P. Diddy Puff Daddy Combs even in this halftime show? He comes out supposedly, reportedly singing, but like, I mean, I kind of rewound it a couple of times. Don't look like he's singing. Look like he's lip syncing, but maybe he's singing. He's like on a stage that moves. There's smoke coming up, and he only sings one song, or lip syncs or barks one song. And then the cheerleaders come out and they're, oh, Diddy, you're so fine. You're so fine. You blow my mind. Hey, Diddy. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on here? It's the choose or die, choose or lose. 2004 was crazy. The year 2000 to like 2005, it feels like a fever dream. But anyway, so Diddy's out there and they're doing a chant for Diddy, you so fine, you blow my mind. Then Nelly comes out, he sings Take Off All Your Clothes. By the time Justin Timberlake comes out, I mean, it's almost like a fart in the wind. He's beatboxing. Can the man stop trying to beatbox? Anyway, so they do their little "Talk to Me, boy," and I don't even know why Janet Jackson is in this song, because it would make you think like, there's like "Talk to Me, boy." That's not Janet Jackson. That's just somebody else. But she's, getting ready. She's got on her dominatrix attire. He's got his whatever he's wearing, so pedestrian. And he says, "Have you naked?" By the end of this song, he reaches over to rip the piece of the costume off, and he misses. So then he's got to do it again. So he's all off beat trying to rip the thing off. It was almost like the Lord was trying to say, you don't need to do that. But he puts his little grubby little talons back and rips it the second time, and that time he's successful in the rip off. Now everybody thinks, that's the main part of the story. No. That's just the story's just getting started. What would follow after this ripping off a piece of Janet Jackson's clothing would be perhaps the most disproportionate, unfair, racially charged, in my opinion, legally dubious punishment in modern entertainment history. And I do feel like, why is it that the Jackson siblings are always picked on? That's just what it seems like to me. So to understand the aftermath and what ended up happening to Janet Jackson, you need to understand who Les Moonves was and what he was in charge of, especially in 2004. He was the head of CBS, but he wasn't just a network executive. We talked about this in my last video, all about the reality shows of the 2000s. But this man, Les Moonves, was arguably the single most powerful person in American television at that time, and possibly even like that there ever was. It cannot be understated how much power this man had over people's lives, over the culture, over what all of us saw on TV, heard on television, radio stations, book publishings. It was a lot of power, like a king almost type of level of power. So he was chairman and CEO of CBS. That was a subsidiary of Viacom, but he didn't just control CBS. He had major influence over MTV, VH1, BET, UPN, Infinity Broadcasting radio stations, and eventually Simon & Schuster Publishing. Put a pin in that. That becomes very important. So basically, if you wanted to be seen or heard anywhere in any way on American television or even kind of like on the radio, it was probably best to not have Les Moonves being mad at you. And this is what multiple sources have confirmed about Les Moonves, his supporters, his critics, all of them, people who worked with him. They all have agreed on one thing about him: he could hold a serious grudge. He remembered his enemies and he got revenge if it took him a lifetime. Now, that's not just my characterization. I don't know this man. I never met him in my life. This is coming directly from reporting by Yashar Ali on Huffington Post, or he was at Huffington Post at the time. I don't know if he's still with them. Anyway, this was confirmed by multiple anonymous sources who talked to Yashar, except they didn't even want to talk off the record. You know how people are like, oh, I'm scared to go on the record. I don't want to give my name. No. These people didn't want to go off the record. They were scared because of how vindictive this man was. So after this Super Bowl incident, we'll call it Pasty Gate, even though, pasty. Les Moonves was furious. He was fuming. I guess he had promised the NFL that the show was going to be family friendly. And I mean, it's interesting to even find out they ever cared about that. But anyway, so the NFL officials were apparently, I guess, mad about it too. Les Moonves had promised it would be family friendly. Of course, it's not family friendly if you're disrobing and having people naked by the end of this song. And I guess he also felt a little bit played, like publicly humiliated, because Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake kind of went against him and made him look bad. Now, according to multiple sources who spoke to reporters, Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson were banned from the Grammys. They were banned from the Grammys because of this Pasty Gate situation. And get this, the Grammys were also to be airing on CBS, the same channel as the Super Bowl. And it was only a week later after the Super Bowl were the Grammys. So Justin Timberlake was set to perform, banned. Well, that's where the story splits off, because Justin Timberlake got his behind in a car and drove to the CBS headquarters to personally meet with Les Moonves. And according to sources who had claimed they spoke with Moonves after the situation, Justin tearfully apologized. He's on his hands and knees, please, I'm so sorry. But because he did that, because he came and he apologized and cried and all of that, he was allowed to go to the Grammys. He was unbanned from the Grammys. He did perform twice at that Grammy Awards that year, and he actually also won multiple awards. So his reputation ends up being pretty much rehabilitated in a matter of days. But Janet Jackson did not drive to CBS studios or even try to meet with Les Moonves personally. She did issue a public apology, to the public. This was one day after the Super Bowl. But according to these, insider anonymous sources who have talked to reporters in the years, really what Les Moonves was really mad at was that. It was that Janet did not come out and beg and grovel. She didn't offer this tearful, personal, submissive, cuckified apology like what Justin Timberlake had done. And for that, the failure to grovel to Les Moonves, Janet Jackson's career ended up being at stake.
So, MTV, CBS, the NFL had no knowledge of this whatsoever, and unfortunately, the whole thing went wrong in the end. I am really sorry if I offended anyone. That was truly not my intention.
So what Les Moonves did wasn't just passive. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to stop helping her out. No. He actively sabotaged things that Janet Jackson had in the works. And this is, again, according to sources. I don't know this man. I didn't ask him myself. I'm telling you what has been reported. It was an active, coordinated suppression campaign across an entire media conglomerate. Under Les Moonves' direct orders, Viacom properties, which included MTV and VH1, this is where we got our music videos at the time. MTV, VH1, BET, that was pretty much where music videos came on. MTV and VH1 were told to literally blacklist Janet Jackson. Do not play her music videos. All Viacom-owned radio stations stopped playing her music. She was banned from the Grammys as a presenter. She was discouraged from even attending the Grammys. Literally, she was on the blacklist. This is the blacklist that they all seem so scared of. And the timing could not have been worse, or I guess better, depending on whose perspective you're looking at it from. But Janet had a brand new album that was just about to come out within the next month. She had an album coming out called Damita Joe. It was supposed to be released March 30th, 2004. So it was less than 2 months after the Super Bowl, but it was like the next month. And this album was slated to be a major commercial hit. But instead, when it did launch, it launched into a media black hole, or blacklist, we should say. Still, the album did debut at number 2 on the Billboard 200 with first week sales at 381,000 copies. But this is Janet Jackson. Her previous album, for example, All For You, had debuted at number 1 with 605,000 sales. So like when she got blacklisted, it was like 381,000. And then comparing it to her previous, she had sold 600,000 copies. Like not quite double, but like a lot more. In the end, the album that she released, Damita Joe, was certified platinum. It sold roughly 1 million copies domestically compared to the multi-platinum certifications of her prior work, which again, it was way less that she sold. Now, devil's advocate here, she could, not that the devil needs me to advocate, but maybe this just wasn't destined to sell as many as before. But you can't ignore that she was not allowed to have her music videos on the MTV VH1. She wasn't allowed to present at the Grammys. I mean, there were serious and real marketing consequences for her. So the next part makes my blood boil, high key, low key. Viacom insiders would later come out and say that, and I quote, they were absolutely bailing on the record. That's Janet's album. The pressure was, quote, so great they can't align anything related to Janet. The high-ups are still pissed at her, and the punishment was described as a, quote, punitive measure. The radio wouldn't play the singles from the album. MTV wouldn't play the music videos. VH1 also wouldn't play the music videos. And commentators at the time noted that the songs were good, especially I Want You and All Night. These would have been major hits at any other point in Janet's career. So despite this blackout and the blacklist, we should say, Janet Jackson's single, I Want You, still became her 33rd, oh, they love that number, consecutive top 40 R&B hip-hop hit, and she did win a Grammy for the song Best Female R&B Vocal Performance. So even though she was systematically suppressed by the most powerful media executive in America, she was still undeniable. But major damage commercially had been done. So now I want to talk a little bit about what Janet Jackson could have done here and maybe speculate a little bit on why she didn't do it. My legal brain can't help but wonder, doesn't Janet Jackson, or didn't, I think the statute of limitations would be long expired at this point, but I feel like she probably had a legal claim against Les Moonves for what's called tortious interference, or tortious interference with a business contract. What Les Moonves reportedly orchestrated against Janet Jackson, I think has a name. It's called tortious interference with a business relationship. And that's at least how I am understanding this whole scenario. Let me show you what I mean. Tortious interference happens when a third party, intentionally on purpose, disrupts an existing or prospective business relationship between two other parties, causing economic harm. And they weigh out a few different variables, including, was there some other reason for the action? Let me show you what I mean. Here's the elements. There's 5 elements. So the first one is a valid business relationship has to have existed in the first place to even be interfered with. Okay, so that's element 1. Element 2, the defendant, that in this case I think would be Les Moonves, had to know about the relationship or the contract that he was interfering with. The third element is that the defendant, again, Les Moonves, in this hypothetical scenario, had to intentionally, on purpose, interfere specifically with the business relationship. The fourth element is very important because the interference has to be improper for no other reason other than just trying to, do something improper. And of course, as in most torts, there have to be damages, has to have caused damages. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these elements. So first of all, did Janet have a valid business relationship or a business expectancy? In my opinion, absolutely. She had a record deal. She had an album about to drop. She had pre-existing, I'm sure, relationships with radio programs and DJs, video, music channels, concert promoters, and advertisers. Those are all cognizable business relationships as far as I can tell. The second element had to be Les Moonves knew about the business relationships. Of course, and he obviously did. This is the most obvious part to me, in my opinion, based on public record. He ran the media companies involved. He was literally their boss. He was the boss of all of them. And remember the last video we talked about America's Next Top Model? That they had made that docuseries on Netflix and about how Tyra had cast a Latina model for the series and Les Moonves personally intervened in the casting. This to me shows, in my opinion, Les had a very granular microscope on everything that was going on at the network and at the show level. Even though he was so high up, He was making decisions on this granular level, at least according to, this recent documentary. So it is difficult for me to imagine that he didn't know about Janet Jackson's pre-existing business contracts and agreements. So the third element of tortious interference has to be, did Les Moonves intentionally, on purpose, interfere with Janet Jackson's contracts and her business dealings? And according to multiple sources reported, he personally ordered the Blacklist across MTV, VH1, BET, Viacom radio stations, so I would say that element is also met. The second to last element, the fourth element, was his interference, quote, improper. So this is where it does get a little more nuanced, a little more wishy-washy. Courts in these cases will look at various factors. Some of the factors they look at are the nature of the conduct, the motive behind the action that Les or, a defendant in any of these cases would take, and whether the interference was disproportionate to any legitimate business interests. So this is, put another way, put in common terms, could Les Moonves have come up with some type of good reason why he wanted Janet Jackson's videos to be taken all off of MTV and VH1? I mean, he may say, for example, she was being a bad example onto the children or something, but it's like, well, you're going to have a hard time explaining the rest of the music videos they were playing on there, kind of thing. But Les Moonves' motive, according to every source that was interviewed, was a personal grudge, an ego vendetta, rage, because he was pissed, he was mad at Janet Jackson. So obviously this doesn't appear to me to be a legitimate business justification and all of that. So then finally, were there damages? The fifth element is damages, harm, the commercial destruction of Damita Jo and the long-term suppression of Janet's career, I think speak for themselves. I think it's a strong argument to be made anyway. I mean, on the other side of things, again, just to give the other side, she still went platinum with the album. A lot of people's albums don't go platinum. She still won a Grammy for one of the songs. Some people might argue she wasn't really blacklisted and she just didn't have as strong of an album performance. But I do think that there was a very strong legal argument to be made. And if that analysis is right, then the question becomes, why didn't Janet at least try to sue this man to clear her name or to get back at him or whatever? Well, the most likely answer is the same reason that Moonves' later accusers, he had accusers later of assault, which is a totally separate issue than his just like tyranny and cruelty, but it's probably the same reason they didn't come forward until years later. The man controlled the industry. Suing Les Moonves in 2004 would have meant going to war, like kind of literally, not even just against him, but against everything that he controlled. All these networks, all these stations, the book publishing. At the time, he controlled whether your music got played, whether your face appeared on television, whether your book got published. One source who spoke with Huffington Post about the Les Moonves vendetta said that they wouldn't go on record because, and I quote, they were, quote, not interested in having that man follow me to the grave and trying to screw me over the whole time. I told y'all he holds his grudges. So that's the level of fear this man inspired, allegedly, according to anonymous sources. So here's something I don't really ever see put in the headlines. I mean, I see Janet Jackson being dragged across the internet in the headlines, but here's something I think we need to pay a little bit more attention to. CBS, the one who aired the Super Bowl, was fined $550,000 by the FCC for the Pastygate situation. At the time, that was the biggest indecency fine that had ever been imposed in American broadcast history, about $500,000. And the entire premise of Les Moonves' rage, why he was so mad, his justification toward being mad at Janet Jackson, was built on the foundation of that fine. So basically, Les would use that as, an excuse maybe to justify whatever punishment he kept exacting upon Janet Jackson. He would say, oh, she cost the network so much money, $500,000, blah, 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 da, da, da. But here's what actually happened in real life and not in the fantasy world created by the media controlled by them. So back in reality with the rest of us, CBS actually sued the FCC over that fine. CBS viciously fought that fine in federal court for what would become an 8-year legal battle. In 2008, 4 years after the Pastygate incident, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia overturned the FCC fine, ruling that the FCC had acted arbitrarily and capriciously. The irony. So that appeals court found that the FCC had departed from its own long-standing practices, and they would allow fleeting images without punishment, and that they had done so in the past without adequate notice or justification. They would allow fleeting images without punishment, and the fact that they punished Janet Jackson or Justin Timberlake or CBS at all for this was considered to be improper by literally federal courts. So in plain English, the FCC sort of just decided its own rules didn't apply to this Janet Jackson situation after the fact, and then punished CBS for her actions. The court ruled that that was fundamentally a violation of administrative law and, frankly, unconstitutional, because the reasoning is that artists and CBS, they have the right to look at the precedent of how things are normally treated and then act accordingly. You can't just be making up new rules as you go, especially when it comes to issues of freedom of expression and things like that. So, coming as a surprise to no one, the FCC appeals this all the way up. It bounces up to the United States Supreme Court. This case went to the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court decides on a couple issues, bounces the case back down again. So in 2011, years and years after Pasty Gate, the Third Circuit reviewed the case again and ultimately reached the same conclusion as they reached previously, and that is the FCC acted arbitrarily and the fine couldn't stand. The next year, in 2012, the Supreme Court denied the FCC's final petition to be reviewing the case again. The case was finally over.
As soon as I started looking at the halftime show, I felt like I was kicked in the stomach. I know some of you were there at the game, watching what was going on. We certainly did not, in the end, retain or assert sufficient control over the final character, content, lyrics, choreography, and other critical elements of the show, and for that we take responsibility. And reflecting on it, I feel like we gave the keys to the car to someone else for them to drive without assuring ourselves that they knew how to drive safely, and the car crashed.
So, TLDR, CBS never actually had to pay that fine. CBS never had to pay the fine. Okay? So one more time to the people in the back. The $550,000 fine that Les Moonves used to use to justify all this hatred toward Janet Jackson, which we really know the real reason for the hatred is just his ego. But he would say, oh, she cost us so much money. No, she didn't, because nobody had to pay that fine. By the time the $550,000 fine was deemed to be basically unlawful, 8 years had gone by, and Janet Jackson's career had already suffered the damage it was going to suffer. But the legal foundation for every single thing that was done to her did crumble. Another thing the court decided in that case, the court went further. They said Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake are not CBS employees. They are independent contractors, so CBS should have never been fined. It should have been somebody else been fined anyway. The FCC couldn't even hold CBS vicariously liable for the actions of Justin and Janet, and the entire enforcement theory collapsed at every level. And here is a completely unsurprising cherry on top of this legal absurdity. In 2014, literally 10 years after the Pasty Gate incident, the former FCC chairman Michael Powell, that's the man who initiated the investigation into Pasty Gate, he called the performance a classless, crass, and deplorable stunt. He gave an interview to ESPN magazine 10 years after the incident. This is 2014. Now it's like 12 years ago. He admitted the outrage was performative. He said it was fake. He actually didn't give a flying beep, beep, beep about this Pasty Gate incident. He was just pretending to care. He said he had to put his best version of outrage on. He said the whole thing was blown out of proportion. Yeah, well, because of him. He said he thought it was really unfair that all the blame fell entirely on Janet Jackson, and he pointed out that it was just Justin himself who was ripping off the breastplate or whatever. Okay, so wait, let's zoom out a little bit. The FCC chairman who led the investigation admitted his outrage was fake. The federal fine that was used to justify the blacklist, overturned, unconstitutional. And the money changer who orchestrated the destruction of Janet Jackson's career, he didn't have a legitimate business reason for doing this. It was because Janet didn't grovel at his feet. That's according to reports. Now, coming as a surprise, definitely not to me, Les Moonves would face allegations later in his career of being a serial predator. And he also was featured prominently in the Epstein files because of it. Jeffrey Epstein was gossiping in the Epstein files emails about this man. And I really don't think that story has been properly told until now. So what Les Moonves did to Janet Jackson was not isolated in the least. as far as I can tell. It was more of a tactic from like a playbook that he used before and would use again. When you see the pattern, the Janet Jackson story kind of transforms from this isolated incident into evidence of a serial predator playbook, in my opinion. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and he has not been criminally charged for any of this. But in September 2018, Les Moonves resigned, but it's reported that he was forced out. He was going to get fired if he didn't resign from CBS. And this was after at least 12 different women accused him of harassment and assault in 2 explosive reports by Ronan Farrow in The New Yorker. This is 2018, kind of like still height of the Me Too movement. The allegations from these women spanned decades. It wasn't new, and it was still ongoing according to their allegations. They included forcible touching, forced acts, and physical intimidation. And multiple women, this part's really important, said that Les Moonves retaliated against them professionally when they rejected his advances.
This is a story that I've been investigating for the last 8 months. It involves 6 women overcoming a lot of fear of retaliation to tell very serious stories of sexual misconduct about Les Moonves, one of the most powerful men in television.
So let's look at a couple specifics. Like I said, it was like at least 12 women. Let's just look at 2. This is a woman by the name of Sybil Shepherd. She's an actress and star of the CBS sitcom Sybil, and this ran from 1995 to 1998 and won 3 Emmys. Sybil came forward in December 2018 and said Les Moonves arranged a dinner with her during the time her show was on the air. And he told her his wife and mistress didn't turn him on and offered to take her home. Well, when she refused, she says the show began receiving increasingly hostile notes from network executives, so like the high-ups. She was eventually barred from the editing room, and the show was ultimately canceled. And Sybil Shepherd claims that the show would have continued to run but for her refusal of Les Moonves' advances. Then there is another example, a woman by the name of Bobby Phillips. She's also an actress. And according to her account published in the New York Times, so not the New Yorker, we got the New Yorker and the New York Times within a month of each other putting the stories out. I guess he got the green light for whatever reason. And I'm wondering if it's because Jeffrey Epstein was ticking away on his keyboard with literally New York Times reporter Michael Wolff, but that's a story for another day, or else the web is going to web into infinity. So this Bobby Phillips, she came forward November 2018, and she alleged that during the same time period as the Sybil allegations, 1995, during a business meeting at none other than Warner Brothers, Les Moonves, allegedly according to Bobby Phillips, exposed himself and told her, "Be my girlfriend and I'll put you on a show," and then physically forced her to perform an action on him. "Be my girlfriend and I'll put you on a show." Girl. I don't know, I wasn't there. I was 4 years old or whatever at the time, okay? So anyway, her career was effectively ended after that. She retired from acting in 2003. She claimed she suffered anxiety attacks that prevented her from attending auditions. And according to her and other reports, Les Moonves tried to silence her, kind of buy her silence, hush money. He would dangle acting roles through Bobby Phillips's agent. Be like, "Oh, here, let her have this role, let her have this role." And he reportedly told the manager, so Les Moonves reportedly told Bobby Phillips's manager that if Bobby Phillips ever talked about what she knew, he was finished. So Les Moonves, he knew. This is hearsay. I wasn't there, but I do want to report what I have seen. So fast forward to 2018, and Les Moonves is, effectively fired. He did resign, I do want to be very clear, but it was kind of like ousted. Under his contract, if they were to fire him before his contract was up, he was entitled to $120 million severance pay, but he did not get it. He did not get his $120 million severance package after investors found he had misled investors and attempted to obstruct the investigation, including reportedly asking that manager, Bobby Phillips's manager, to delete text messages. So that all was in 2018. Fast forward a few more years to 2022, and he got in even more trouble. This time it's getting closer to legal trouble. Okay, so in 2022, he had already been ousted from CBS, but he was still ordered to pay a $30.5 million fine. And so was CBS. Les Moonves and CBS were forced to settle with the Attorney General of New York for $30 million. Why? You might be wondering why. Why? Well, The New York Attorney General allegedly had found that CBS executives conspired not only with each other, but with LAPD to conceal evidence of supposedly of crimes, $30 million. So the irony here, it blows my mind because this man was mad about $500,000 fine, so mad about it. For 8 years, they went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and that was a half of $1 million. This is $30.5 million. What were they supposedly? They did settle this. It didn't go to court fully, but the New York Attorney General accused CBS and Les Moonves of conspiring with the LAPD to conceal evidence of Les Moonves' sexual assaults. So are y'all seeing the pattern? Sybil Shepherd rejected him. The show was canceled. Bobby Phillips reportedly was assaulted. Her career was destroyed. Text messages were asked to be deleted. Janet Jackson didn't grovel at her feet, at his bunions, at Les Moonves' bunions. She gets blacklisted. And Les Moonves does use the same tactic every time. He uses his power and his control over the media distribution channels, over the contracts, to effectively punish the women who don't submit to his authority. So now I want to turn our attention to another little critter on the stage, Justin Grabby Hands Timberlake. And mind the timeline, because it does show the most calculated, I think, reputation pivot that ever was. So going back to the Super Bowl, the night of the Super Bowl, Justin Timberlake actually spoke to Access Hollywood. He did an interview. And his tone was casual, playful. He was kikiing. It almost seemed to me like he was advertising it. Like he knew. Like he was like, oh yeah, we knew this was going to be controversial. He definitely didn't seem worried. And he definitely did not seem like he was some type of victim. Now, look, listen, that everybody reacts to things in a different way, but I'm failing to see how Justin Timberlake still to this day was like painted as the victim when he was the one that Have You Naked by the end of this song, rip, and then missed, and then he was offbeat, rip again, but the mystery of our time. Within days of the incident, though, the firestorm had kind of erupted, and Justin Timberlake, remember, he was kind of marketed as this like Christian values, like, you know, guy. Britney Spears cheated on him and all this stuff or whatever. And so it's like, how is it that he's always being portrayed as the victim? Again, like I said, he had done an interview that night with Access Hollywood, and in the interview, he was like laughing, giggling, and kikiing, like he knew it was a PR stunt. But within days of the, thing popping off, he did, like I said, reportedly drove to CBS himself in his car and went and groveled. And then that allowed him to be unbanned from the Grammys. He performed 2 times at the Grammys. He won awards that night. Again, the Grammys were on CBS. Remember that? And he did admit, or apologize. He said that it was a mistake, unintentional, quote, unintentional, and quote, completely regrettable. What does that even mean? Like, I don't even know how you could unintentionally rip somebody's bra off on a stage. Like, they say words to mean anything. Anything means anything with these people. Meanwhile, though, Janet Jackson was banned from the Grammys entirely. She lost critical promotional opportunities during that time for her album that was about to come out the next month, and she suffered great harm, in my opinion, as a result of the punishment she received. But Justin, on the other hand, he was not only just allowed to continue on, his solo career completely accelerated after that incident. So, I mean, one could be forgiven for thinking that Janet Jackson and her career and her reputation were sacrificed at the altar of Justin Timberlake's solo career. But I mean, I don't know if that's what happened. He did go on to become a huge, albeit cringy, pop star, and he was even invited back to the Super Bowl to headline in 2018, the same year Les Moonves started to face his reckoning and quit or resign from CBS. Meanwhile, this 14 years after the incident, Janet Jackson still remained in exile. Now, Justin Timberlake did not ever publicly apologize to Janet Jackson until basically like just now. In February 2021, 17 years after the incident, Justin Timberlake did apologize. But he only did that after the documentary Framing Britney Spears triggered a wave of social media backlash against Justin Timberlake. And this, in my opinion, forced him to have to reckon with his history of benefiting at the expense of women in his orbit. In this ridiculous Instagram post, he acknowledged benefiting from a system that condones misogyny and racism. The apology did take him 17 years and a documentary and millions of people's justified rage, but I guess better late than never. And as an idiot goblin did once say, what goes around, comes all the way back around. The Lord said vengeance is mine, because guess where we are today? Within this past week, March 2026, Justin Timberlake is suing the village of Sag Harbor, New York, and its police department to block the release of 8 hours of body camera footage of him getting arrested for a DUI.
So the reason for the stop is because you're keep veering off to the left, and then you're not stopping at the stop signs.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
What are you doing?
I'm on a world tour.
A what?
A world tour.
Doing what?
Hard to explain. A world tour. I'm Justin Timberlake.
What's your name?
Justin Timberlake.
You are Justin Timberlake?
Yeah.
So this incident was from June 2024. He got arrested for a supposed driving while intoxicated. He did plead guilty, but it was to a reduced charge of driving while impaired. So I don't know. I guess in New York, there's a difference between driving while intoxicated, driving while impaired. He was fined $500 and given community service. But this man who left Janet Jackson to face the public humiliation alone of his little stunt he participated in, well, now he's spending a bunch of money on lawyers to try to make sure that you don't see him at his worst. He claims in his whiny legal filings that the footage, 8 hours of body camera footage, would cause severe and irreparable harm to his reputation. Oh no, his own actions would cause him severe harm. Oh no, the consequences of his own actions, everybody, we gotta keep it from the public. Anyway, speaking of irony, and to give another tired cliche, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Because remember what I just said, his punishment was $500 in community service, okay, for his DWI. But the industry that he apologized for, I'm so sorry, I participated in something that was benefiting from misogyny and racism. Well, that system still appears to be very alive and well and still appears to be benefiting him, because while Justin got off with $500 fine in community service and maybe none of us ever see his body camera footage, which is supposed to be a public record, by the way, Britney Spears, his ex, also got pulled over for a supposed DUI just in the last week or so. And she's being threatened with another forced abusive conservatorship, rehab that she doesn't want to go to, and supposedly it's for the same behaviors. But anyway, justice for Britney.
Britney Spears was booked, arrested in Ventura County out here in California, and she was released early Thursday morning.
Fans across social media reacting with mixed feelings for the star.
I hope that this will be the consequence that changes her behavior.
She needs help. She has been through a lot. Hollywood took that young girl at the time, chewed her up, drained her of everything, and then spit her out like she was trash.
You can be a fan of Britney and still admit that she needs some sort of support.
Why is it Justin Timberlake gets a $500 fine in community service, but Britney Spears got to be threatened by the entire national media with a conservatorship? Nobody was saying Justin Bieber. Beep, they are saying that. Nobody's saying Justin Timberlake needs a conservatorship. They said, okay, $500 and a fine, $500 in some community service, but Britney needs to be enslaved? Okay, all right. So the system he was apologizing for benefiting from is still alive and well, and he's still benefiting. So now I want to talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's one more timeline that I think really needs our attention. Get ready to relocate your jaw from picking it up off the floor, okay? We're talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So artists become eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or nominations to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, 25 years after their first recording is published. Janet Jackson's first album was released in September 1982, so she became eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to be nominated in 2007. This would have been, like 3 years after the Super Bowl incident. Janet Jackson was not even nominated until 2016, 9 years late. Even nominated. We're not even talking about inducted, because she wasn't inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame until 2019 on her third nomination. 12 years after she was eligible. So just to give you a comparison, Madonna is also an artist from Janet Jackson's time, and her first album or whatever was in 1983. So right around the same time, she became eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Madonna did in 2008. Guess when she got inducted? 2008. Okay. And we, again, have already talked about how Janet Jackson was a Guinness Book of World Record holder for Guinness Book, a world record holder for her musical career. Let's look at somebody else. Let's not even just compare Madonna and Janet. What about Janet Jackson's brother, Michael Jackson? He also had controversial allegations. He had a lot of things going against him. He was on blacklists as well, but Michael Jackson was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice before his sister was even nominated. And the first one, he was inducted in 1997. This was in connection with his work with the Jackson 5, the band he had with his siblings. He was inducted again in 2001 for his solo career. Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson's brother. Guess who inducted Michael Jackson into the Hall of Fame in 2001? Take one guess. NSYNC. It was NSYNC. It was NSYNC. Woo, the web is webbing. Anyway, so I don't know why Justin Grabby Hands Timberlake is always just lurking about on these big incidents, but here he is. Anyway, who controls the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Nominees and inductions and all of that. Who controls it? Well, coming as a surprise, definitely not to me. It's voted on by industry insiders. The same industry insiders that Les Moonves dominated from his position atop CBS and Viacom. He was still running CBS in September 2018, and Janet Jackson was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in March 2019, 6 months after Les Moonves' departure. One could be forgiven for assuming he literally still had Janet Jackson blacklisted all those years later. Even after his own sins were already starting to find him out, he held that pathetic, stupid grudge for decades. That's what it seems like to me. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. One of the most telling details here is as late as 2012, 8 years after the Super Bowl incident, Les Moonves was apparently reportedly still furious at Janet, and when he discovered that she had signed a book deal with Simon & Schuster, which was owned by CBS, if you will recall, he reportedly said, and I'm quoting from sourced reporting, quote, "How the beep did she slip through?" He then reportedly told colleagues that, quote, "heads were going to roll." In 2012, this is 8 years after the incident, this man is still tracking Janet Jackson's movements within his own corporate empire. Girl, he was obsessed. It was unhealthy level of fixation. And that's exactly what sources called it, a fixation. That's how they described Les Moonves' stank-ass attitude toward American royalty, Janet Jackson. Les Moonves operated in the same ecosystem as every other media gatekeeper who used their power, control, and all of that money to silence and punish subordinates. Just remember all the stories that we've told on this channel, all the artists whose careers were derailed or destroyed, not by lack of talent, but by this demon-possessed industry that rewards compliance and punishes true independence. The mechanism is almost always the same. One person controls the artist, the contracts, the distribution, and they use the control as a weapon. And truly, that's why I keep telling these stories. Sometimes they even start to sound alike or the same. It's like Groundhog Day, but it is, because what happened to Janet Jackson is important. Her story in and of itself deserves to be told, but it's also an emblem for a lot of people's story. A lot of people have suffered with this, and thank God Janet Jackson is so talented and so powerful and so supported, because she was able to, in some ways, survive the blacklist. And it's not, even just a pyramid. That's why I always say the web is webbing, because it's like a spider web. It's like, the tentacles, the tendrils. Every artist who has ever been blacklisted, the performers who've been told to shut up and be grateful or else they're going to get lithium, they're going to get sent to zombie land. Every creator who has watched their work be buried because they wouldn't bend the knee, Janet Jackson's story is also their story. I finally have lived long enough to see that a lot of times there are silver linings in these stories. The people who wield all the power, eventually they do fall. Eventually they piss off the right person themselves, and they do have to face consequences. Les Moonves did anyway. And when he fell, the truth started to come out. The artists they tried to destroy, they often endure, unless they meet an untimely end, but that's a story for another day. For 22 years, the dominant narrative about the 2004 Super Bowl has been wrong. The wardrobe malfunction wasn't even half the story. The full story includes this lunatic, maniacal maniac who demanded obedience and groveling in a woman who refused to give it to him. And it looks like history might be showing us who was on the right side. That's all I really had for this one. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation, neither are opinions. Love you, mean it, K, bye. Make sure you're subscribed. You might have got unsubscribed. Love you, mean it, K, bye.